G'day there, I'm SnakeOfBacon, and this is the Ratchet Clank Trilogy for the Vita. 3 games. 1 Vita. 1 review. 3 games. 1 SnakeOfBacon, 1 Vita. Ratchet Clank. Yes, the review has started. No, I don't know what I'm doing. That's alright, we'll work it out. So, released in 2002 for the PlayStation 2, the original Ratchet & Clank game is here on the Vita. It came to the PS3 as part of the Ratchet & Clank Trilogy or Collection in 2012, and that same trilogy or collection, depending on which market you're in, came to the Vita in 2014. Now, to get my personal biases out of the way, I'm a long-time fan of the Ratchet & Clank series, having been introduced to this game back in probably 2003 or so, on a cousin's PS2. And I'm pretty sure he rang my mother to check that it was alright for me to be playing a G8 plus rated game before I was 8. So, I've played Ratchet & Clank 1 a lot of times, on PS2, on PS3, and now on PS Vita. Here's the second playthrough. Yes, I'm shooting bad on purpose. You can tell it's the second playthrough because I've got some money and all the weapons, including the Walloper. I can wallop things. And I like to wallop things, because the Walloper is an electromagnetically propelled boxing glove. You throw a punch, and the punch throws you forward, with all the force of a maglev train, through your opponent, punting them off into some other place, unless you miss. Or I could tactically vacuum with the original suck cannon in its debut game. Well, maybe Birdo was the original suck cannon, but Birdo's a character, not a weapon. The suck cannon is a great example of emergent gameplay, where a simple situation of small enemies hopping around, and a simple tool of a cordless blower vac create a complex situation. Which enemies am I sucking up? What am I spitting them at? Thousands of possibilities. And now that I have this knowledge, I cannot be trusted with a cordless blower vac lest I attempt to solve Australia's cane toad scourge. I jest, of course. That's quite inhumane, and cordless electric blower vacs don't yet have enough power to suck up an adult cane toad. Now, back to Ratchet & Clank. It's more than just weapons. Combat is a little bit odd in this game compared to all later installments in the series, because for the most part there's no strafing. There's hover strafing very late in the game, but it's not really useful in many situations. You can go the whole game without ever using it, but you have to get accustomed to doing combat quite differently to how you would in most modern action games. Because this is, of course, a hybrid between a platformer and a third-person shooter, and it still handles much more like a platformer. Thankfully one with a checkpoint system rather than lives. Oh, and I hope you noticed, that loading was instantaneous. When you fall off, you will fall off, and you will die in combat, you load instantly. There's no loading in the levels, only in between. Now, about how this is a platformer with combat. You'll be platforming for a while, and you always see a combat encounter coming around the corner. You have plenty of advance warning that, hey, you're about to do some combat. Combat for Atari! So you think about what weapons you're going to use. Long range, short range, explosive, traps, before you get into combat, because the weapon wheel doesn't automatically pause the game. A feature added to all the later Ratchet & Clanks to give you a little moment to breathe and think about, hold on, which of the 8 weapons in my wheel am I using? Because otherwise, you were just going to pause the game anyway and select a weapon from the weapon menu, so why not have quick select pause the game? But despite all these odd idiosyncrasies, like the strange aiming and all that, it's an excellent platformer and just a great adventure overall. The character designs and animations and cutscenes and all that are really top-notch for their time and still look perfectly fine. It helps that they were going for a retro future sci-fi cartoon art style. It's timeless. Not just the tart style. I can go for a lemon tart. Some other time though, geez, today I've eaten pretty much nothing but Easter eggs. As I was saying, it's not just the art style that makes this game timeless. It's the way everything is structured to be so immersive and so true to one aesthetic. The art style, the UI, the music by David Bergeau, the in-game tutorials being in-universe tutorials for your gadgets just for immersion. They're really good. They're fully voiced weapon tutorials. I don't know if I can get footage of one. Looks like I don't have that footage, but this review's been delayed too long. The Metropolis level early in the game is stunning. There is such a density of stuff here. But my other point was the design of the levels, which are not open worlds, but they have 2 or 3 paths that loop back into the middle, so you take them in whatever order you like. You're guaranteed to see the whole world, but at your own pace. And some planets you visit multiple times. And I suppose that pacing, combined with the design language and aesthetic, is what makes the game so immersive. Was that too pretentious? I think you're getting my point. It's a game with a great atmosphere, and Nazdorovia, and hover trains. Right, but I'm supposed to be reviewing the PlayStation Vita version of Ratchet & Clank, and all that I've said so far can be applied to the PS2 or PS3 versions as well. What specifically makes Ratchet & Clank on the Vita good or bad or different? Well, it's pretty much the exact same game as it is on PS2 and 3, but it's portable. You can hold it in your hands. You can put it in your pocket if your pocket's really big. Or what I do is I put it in a pencil case with a lanyard attached to it. And then you can take it places. Take it on a bus, take it to the chemist so you can stand the corner while you wait forever at the chemist. You know, Ratchet & Clank might actually help you live, look, and feel well while you're at Chemist Warehouse. I'm so sick of their radio. Right, now, downsides specific to the Vita version are that it is locked to 30 FPS. No, capped, sorry. It doesn't always maintain 30 FPS. A bit of a shame. In contrast, on PS3, it's a 60 FPS that it really doesn't maintain in combat, unless you turn it down to 720p. And on PS2, the game ran at 60Hz, or 50Hz for PAL. Also, my tripod broke and I tried to fix it with Blue Tack and it didn't work. Which is irrelevant, and the piece of styrofoam I found to replace it worked better anyway. The other problem is just that Vita controls can get a bit weird when there's things that would have required R2 and L2. Now in the first Ratchet & Clank, that's limited to hover strafing, which is pointless anyway, but it's very hard to pull off on the Vita. And not trespasser puzzles, don't know why that footage is here. Well, I mean, I had to use it, but... Okay, no, anyway, the main thing that you do with the rear touchpad in Ratchet & Clank 1 on Vita is hoverboard tricks when you're hoverboard racing. This hoverboard minigame used all 4 of the PS2's shoulder buttons for tricks, much like the earlier SSX. And that's fine on PS2 and PS3, but on Vita, where you only have 2 shoulder buttons, the bottom 2 had to be something, and so they're invisible zones marked out somewhere on the rear touchpad. It takes a while to find them and get used to where they are. They're around the top right and top left corners. But yeah, it's possible. It's possible to do a Twisty McMarks for the skill point. I did it earlier today. I wasn't filming though, frustratingly. But it takes a lot of getting used to, and it's not very tangible feeling, because it isn't. They're not buttons, they're just flat spots. Now hey, we're over 8 minutes in and I hadn't shown you this piece of foam yet, or the other 2 games in this trilogy. Why look, it's Ratchet & Clank 2, Locked and Loaded, Going Commando, whatever, Ratchet & Clank 2. Ginga no Commando, sir. Doesn't matter what it was called, it had different names in different markets. The one where combat started to be emphasised much more, and Ratchet gained a strafe button, greatly enhancing his ability to dodge stuff and aim at things. It also introduced the experience point system to Ratchet & Clank, where you start with only 4 health like the first game, but rapidly gain more as you fight more enemies. And your weapons earn experience too, and they upgrade when they've destroyed enough enemies. You go from normal weapons to upgraded weapons, and then in the challenge mode, there's a lot more to do than there was in Ratchet & Clank 1's challenge mode, where you basically just went and found all the gold bolts and got gold weapons and finally bought the overpriced Rhino. Here in Ratchet & Clank 2's challenge mode, you have a bolt multiplier, enabling you to earn up to 20 times more bolts depending on how careful you are, and you can re-buy your upgraded weapons in Mega form and then upgrade them again to Ultra form. 4 weapon levels. So many of the core features of most Ratchet & Clank games were introduced with this one, so to reiterate, weapon leveling, player leveling, strafing, charge boots. Yep, they're easy to misuse, but they let you move very quickly. Useful for traversing the deserts of Tabora, which was this series' first experiment with having an open sandbox level. Sandbox. Yeah, Tabora is just a very large square and your optional objective is to go out and find all 100 crystals in it. You need to find some for the story, but you can always come back for more until you have them all. Also, you may notice I am again wielding the mighty Walloper, which is not mighty anymore. Some of the weapons from the original Ratchet & Clank return, but they aren't treated the same. You get them for free if you have a late game save from Ratchet & Clank 1. Don't overwrite that with your challenge mode save, make a new one. But unfortunately these weapons don't level up like the Megacorp weapons, which doesn't give you much incentive to use them, especially when they aren't just non-upgradable but underpowered. And by the time you're in challenge mode and you get the Mega Walloper, you'll find it still doesn't do as much damage as your wrench, so what's the point? It's like hitting them with a folded pair of socks. So yeah, weapon balancing does leave some things to be desired, but for the most part they get it right. At least in the first playthrough. Challenge mode gets a bit weird and there's only a few things that are viable. But every weapon has its time and its place, and if it gets outdated, you move on to a different weapon. It keeps variety going, and that is the spice of life, as they say. Variety and paprika, two important spices of life. There are others, other spices and herbs. A variety of spices is the spice of life, that's it. And whatever garlic is, because it's not really a spice or a herb. It's kind of a vegetable, but you can't eat it whole. And you could try, but...
Hey, you did it.
Garlic. Paprika. So, Ratchet & Clank 2 has a variety of things to do. The Electrolyzer minigame is very different to the Trespasser from the first, in that it's an action, flippy, switchy thing, and not a slow logic puzzle with a solution. It's reflexes and tracking test. You've got to follow all these little dots around and decide when to flip the gates. And it's always the same each time, so you could beat it through trial and error, but it's a test of reflexes. It's not the greatest door entry minigame ever made, but it's probably a relief for those of you who found the Trespasser quite intimidating in the original Ratchet & Clank.
Flip.
Although Ratchet & Clank 2 also has that other door minigame later, where you have to rotate a ball, and that's trial and error and memory and speed. So, I don't know, the door minigames are not a big part of Ratchet & Clank 2. Let's move on to another part of the game. Throughout the Ratchet & Clank trilogy on Vita, there are a lot of audio glitches, most of which I don't think are on other platforms. Sometimes level music goes missing after a while spent on a level, and a lot more often, like almost all the time, the audio for the Morph Ray type weapons just keeps on layering itself over and over. Even when you're not using the weapon, you might be hearing 2 or 3 stacked sheepinator noises in this case, which can be very loud. And the solution is to just swing your wrench, but you shouldn't have to swing your wrench to turn off the sheepinator noise. It's an annoying little quirk. And that applies to all 3 games in this collection. Now, back to Ratchet & Clank 2. Besides that audio issue, I don't think I really have any complaints to make. It's a great game. The space combat may not be everyone's cup of tea. I enjoyed it for the most part, but the quality of space missions does vary a lot. This part in this indoor space sphere thing shooting at turrets I found not very interesting. The outdoor space... It's outer space, and there's asteroids and fighter ships, and that is a very, very fun mission, but this one not so much. But there's multiple space missions per space area, so this one is a much better example of space combat being more like Ace Combat, where you're just shooting down lots of enemies and trying to protect something. I filmed this part in 4K for some reason, and if it looks much better I'll know to film all Vita stuff in 4K, but anyway, Ratchet & Clank 2 was an excellent sequel that had platforming and story just as good as or better than its predecessor, and much, much better action due to the improved controls, so it's easy to see why it's so highly recommended by so many people. I didn't get to play it until 2012 as part of the PS3 HD collection, because I never owned it on PS2 as a kid.
Hold on. This one says
I very much enjoy the riding in these games. I won't show you the rest of that scene, that would be a spoiler. Ah, the noisy road machine's back. It's kind of distracting. I'm trying to review Ratchet Clank 2 Noisy Road Machine. Like, thanks for resurfacing, but do you have to do it from 8 till 5 a.m? Anyway, Ratchet Clank 2 is a great game, and you know, it doesn't matter that I didn't get to play it when I was 9, because getting to play it when I was 15 was heaps of fun anyway, and playing it again now on Vita whenever I want to is it's a great thing to have around. Now come on, let's go to Ratchet Clank 3, Up Your Arsenal, one of the biggest games of 2004, reaching new heights for action and title innuendo. And rather than just being another Ratchet & Clank adventure, this is more like Ratchet & Clank participating in a galactic war, occasionally driving a vehicle. And with this emphasis on war action, Ratchet & Clank 3 has something exciting to share with you. It has lock strafe mode. Now, it also has the option to play with the controls of Ratchet & Clank 2, which were perfectly serviceable, but the lock strafe mode controls are fantastic. And why is lock strafe mode fantastic? Why, when I'm trying to play a platformer, do I want to be strafing all the time, you might ask? Well, because it gives you a much tighter grip on the action. You have both thumbs on sticks, you can shoot with the Vita's right trigger, and that means you've got your thumb spare to jump while shooting, while aiming, while moving, the way most modern action games work. Or the honestly quite bizarre option to play the whole game in first-person mode, if you like. Kind of fun to do in some of the arena challenges, but I don't think it's a good way to play the whole game, especially since you can't swing your wrench in first-person, you can only throw it. Speaking of arenas, I haven't mentioned them, the Annihilation Nation arena in this game is fantastic. Ratchet & Clank 2 also had arena combat, but it is very much improved and expanded upon for 3. And if you really like arena combat, you'll probably really like the next Ratchet & Clank game, Gladiator or Deadlocked, which is not part of this collection. I hope you've gotten intimately familiar with where the invisible button on the touchpad is, because if you're in lock strafe mode, you'll need it to crouch, and you need to crouch to do long jumps and high jumps. So yeah, don't get that wrong. As much as I absolutely love the combat in Ratchet & Clank 3, I must admit there is a lot less exploration to be done. Now, the Urbani moons are quite fun, but they're very, very small. Like you can see, that this planet is absolutely tiny. It's really interesting, but once you do it once and get to the goal at the end of that planet, bless you.
Oh man.
Okay, calm down. There's not much, well, you don't have to come back here for anything and go, wow, that's great, my really fun, tiny platforming planet is done after only 15 minutes, and now what am I going to do? Well, don't be sad it's over, be happy it happened, that's what you're going to do. And you can play it again in challenge mode, and challenge mode 2, which is, it's actually the same thing, and once you've got millions and millions and millions of bolts and you've bought everything, there's not much to do but upgrade them all and go for the skill points, and then you need more Ratchet & Clank. There are more Ratchet & Clank games out there, but this is one of the best ones. I've just realised what a big part of my criticism boils down to is that the game doesn't last forever and I want it to. Ratchet & Clank 3 is such a blast to play, but goes by so quickly. I mean, it's about as long as the previous two. But the time flies when you're having fun. Ratchet & Clank 3 is so much fun. And it's a bit of a shame when you get to the end and you become so completely overpowered that there's not much to do. Yeah, upgrading your weapons from V1 to 5 is a thrill, and then from 6 to 8 in challenge mode, heaps of fun. But once you've played the game enough times, I don't know if this is my 9th or 10th playthrough of Ratchet & Clank 3 overall, once you've played enough times you start realising, that was the most fun bit and now it's over. Like, I have the Quacker Array, and when the Quacker Array gets to level 5 and starts making giant fire-breathing ducks, I don't enjoy it as much as the little Quacker Ray that made, normal ducks, or the Rhino. The Rhino in this game, the RY3NO, or rip you 3 new ones, is a fantastic weapon at level 1, and then at level 2, it gets a lot less interesting because it becomes so powerful it disintegrates enemies immediately, and by the time it's the Rhinocerator, it's a full screen kills everything button, and that's fun 10 times, but then it's just a cheat code. So yeah, the best bits of playing Ratchet & Clank 3 are some of the best bits of playing any game that there are. And maybe the Vita's not the best place to play them, but, I mean, it's in the top 3. Oh wait, there's only three platforms to play this game on so far. Well, look, they're all about equally good. From a technical standpoint, this is the inferior version, not running at 60 FPS, but it is running in your hands, so give it some slack. Oh hey, useful information. Did you know that pressing R1, or just R on the Vita, flips to the other side when you're doing the hacking minigame in Ratchet & Clank 3? No, because they don't tell you that? Well, now you know. It can make it easier to get to the other side of things quickly. And it just feels good. I like the hacking minigame of Ratchet & Clank 3. It's like Tempest, 1981 arcade game. That's 40 years old now. And if you played Tempest in the arcades as a kid, and your children may have been playing Ratchet & Clank as kids, and now they're having children too, and you, the Tempest player, are in your 50s, and you may have just bought a new MX-5 for 36 grand, plus on-road costs. Now, I don't have 36 grand plus on-road costs, and I don't know what the future holds, but hopefully in 15 years' time I'll be able to buy it off you significantly depreciated. And it'll still be in good condition because you babied it. But on the subject of Ratchet & Clank Trilogy on the Vita, do I recommend it? Yes, I recommend playing these games anywhere. Do I recommend it specifically on the Vita? Yeah, if you've got a Vita. Do I recommend you buy it in 2021? Well, I bought it very late last year, having no idea that there were plans to shut down the store, which has just become a thing that's apparently going to happen. That started as a rumor a few weeks ago, and now it's officially fact. Sony is closing down the storefront to buy this game in July. Oh, but if you buy it before July, surely you'll still have rights to access and download this thing forever. Well, no, nothing's forever. For a long time, I hope, but I don't have many high hopes from Jim's
Buy a
Sony.
PlayStation 5.
They, I don't know what's going on anymore. And because nobody knows what's going on anymore with the Vita store and stuff, a physical copy of Ratchet & Clank Trilogy on the Vita is worth, I don't know what it's worth, but they're going on eBay from anywhere between 80 and 300 Australian dollars, so people are going a little bit nuts. So, to review your purchasing options using Australian dollars, it's digitally $32.95, and that's cross-buy, so you get it on PS3 and Vita that way. But that option's disappearing soon, and that really sucks. You can get it physically on Vita for a fortune. You can get it physically on PS3 for a smaller fortune. Less than Dead or Alive Extreme 3 fortune in Australia, but more than DHD Collection retailed for new at 50. So, there's no shortage of PS2 copies of all 3 games for reasonable prices, so that's probably the cheapest way at the moment. And look, the footage is looping. You've seen this crash before, as much as it was a great moment. It's a good indicator that it's time to quit. The Ratchet & Clank collection on Vita. It's great. But buying it is a very complicated situation. Think about it.